Okay, so welcome everybody to this week's call. My name is Jackie Boyle and I have the pleasure of living in Sydney in Australia. I believe it's a beautiful place to live and we're heading into spring, so it's starting to feel like we've got that spring in the step. So we all start to look at our diet because we have to shed those clothes and we want to know what we can do and fuel our bodies with that are good food choices. So we do have the esteemed Dr. Joseph Ahrens, dual nominated Nobel Prize scientist with us today, and we're going to be looking at, in particular, 2 to 3 different types of diets. And those would be looking at like Atkins, paleo, keto, those types of things in regards to the different types of diets that you may consider looking at, because as I said, heading into spring here, I don't know, the closet fairies seem to jump into some of our closets every so often. So understanding what is beneficial for us and why some diets are more beneficial in one person's opinion than the next. This is where it's going to be very interesting. So how are you, Dr. Ahrens?
I'm great. I hope you can hear me. I'm not muted.
No, you're not muted, and we've got you back on board. So I was just explaining the importance of understanding knowledge with different types of diets that are out there, like keto, paleo, Atkins diet, that you're going to give a bit of an overview in your opinion as to what you think about them and why, as consumers, as to why we would consider looking at potentially utilizing these diets and why they would be good for our bodies.
Well, I'm really glad to do that. A diet, that's the basis of actually my area, physiology. It means actually the study of the chemistry of life, physiology, and it's all based around nutrition, ultimately. And there's a lot of misconceptions about even what diet means. So it doesn't necessarily mean some program like Atkins diet, although most people do think of some prescribed diet like that when they think of it. But diet actually means what you eat. Diet. And and a lot of people will die if they don't eat. I guess that's how they made that, right? Diet. So what I want to do is instead of just listing a bunch of diets and going through them and running over, because there's never enough time. I get carried away when I start talking, and that clock ticks down. I would like to start out by going over the basis of human nutrition. And then once we're all on the same page, then we'll start going through some of these diets. And then you'll be able to see for yourself why some diets are better than others and some diets are worse than others. I will really try to only give you my professional opinion and not my personal opinion on these diets. So I'll do my best. I'm not trying to push anything one way or the other. I'll also tell you what works for me and people that I know personally and people that I have advised on diets. I actually wrote a book some time ago in 2004. It's the last book I wrote, full book I wrote on diet, which was centered on grapefruit and the nutrition found in grapefruit. And in that book, I proposed some diets for people that, in my research, I had found to work the best for people, clients, subjects, friends, and family. How about that pattern? You think that'll work?
Well, I think so because, as I said to you, I think some of us suffer with having closet fairies that jump in there and shrink our clothes. So if you can enlighten us on different ways of being able to address our diet, I think a lot of us are going to be very happy. So yes.
Yeah, so diet, most people just think about diet and weight gain or weight loss, more weight gain or your clothes shrinking than anything else. And they say, I'm going to go on a diet. They almost always mean I need to lose weight. And let's just talk about good health in general, because as we talked about like last month, it's more to weight gain or loss, not just from what you eat. Things like sleep and exercise are important. And what you eat also affects your sleep and your exercise. They're all tied together. I really, if you, the takeaway message here, first of all, is be informed, be educated, but realize everything is tied together. You've got to consider the whole scope. Don't just isolate one thing in your life and go for that. You know, if you just exercise and don't do anything else, you actually end up in bad health, poor health. And if you also just focus on calories that you're eating, you're going to end up in poor health. So think of it as a 3 or 4-legged stool, and they all are important for you to achieve good health. And that's what we're trying to bring here. We want people to have good health, and from that includes everything else, including mental health. You can't have one without the other. So what are the essential ingredients in a diet, meaning the ration, depending if you're below or above the equator? What are the essential parts of a ration, a diet for humans? Well, it's difficult to say. I can list to you the 20 amino acids and the 13 or 14 vitamins and the 15 minerals that are important to be in your mouth and eat and consume. But actually, we can't really easily experiment on people. And so we still, to this day, do not know what is the perfect diet formula, food formula for humans. And because we can't experiment on them. So we don't say, well, let's just withhold this ingredient and see if they get better or not. It's not going to work. So we have to actually do a lot of guessing. And we look at other animals because, you know, when we have especially domestic animals, we can change their diet and see how, if they get worse or better. Of course, always trying to take care of them. But we can't do that as easily with humans. So we're in the dark here a little bit. But over the centuries, we have figured out fairly well. I think we're probably 80% there, 80%, which is better than it was, 200 years ago. What are the essential components? Well, the categories are amino acids, protein. These are the macro parts of your diet, macronutrients, mean the big parts, the big classifications. Protein. Another one is carbohydrates, sugar. And another one is fats. And the last category is vitamins and minerals. And that's it, plus water. You got to have the right amount and type of protein. You got to have the right amount of fats, and you have to have the right amount of sugars, carbohydrates, and you have to have enough vitamins and minerals. So let us look at each one of those 4 categories, and so we can understand it. And so when you ask me questions in the future and we discuss among ourselves, you'll know what we're all talking about. Well, that's pretty easy. You got all these diets, and they say, oh, you need this much protein and this much sugar, carbohydrates. Remember, carbohydrates and sugar are the same thing. Just included in carbohydrates are undigestible sugars, which is the roughage part in our diet, the roughage that we have to have. And fats, you either say fats, which is oils or fatty acids, and fat. The only difference between an oil and a fat is that at room temperature, which in most of the world we think it's either 20 or 25 degrees Celsius, fat is solid and oil is liquid. They're still fats. They're just fats. Fatty acids are just the little individual pieces of those fats and oils. They're the individual little molecules. And you take a lot of fatty acids and you hook them all together and you get long chain and short chain. And that's a category is a fat. Protein is required because, first of all, it's what makes up all your muscles, proteins, muscle. That's what we eat. If you consume animal products, it's muscle, it's protein. And there's also protein in vegetables, like in corn. There's protein. And we take that protein, and we use it to build our own muscles. Also, protein is made, your hair is made up out of, your hair somewhere right here, your hair is made out of, and your fingernails, they're made out of mostly protein. It's not digestible. We can't really digest that, but still it's protein. Keratin, it's called keratin. And you need that, absolutely need that protein. Well, how's that related? Protein in your muscles and protein in your hair, and also the enzymes in your body and the hormones, they're also a type of protein. Protein is the key to life. Protein is the number one. Protein, because it's what runs your body. It's your structure, and it's all the things that run your body. The DNA inside your cells that comes out of your nucleus and then unravels, and then there's all the genes, and then we have translation and transcription. It's a very complicated process. And what is it doing? What is that process doing? Has anyone ever thought about that? Probably not. Just a few people on this call do understand it. What are your genes doing? How did they replicate you? How do they control and regulate life? They're making amino acids and proteins. They're making proteins. And then those proteins go on to make everything else in your body, as well as to regulate your body. Hormones are proteins. It really means mostly that they're amines, and that means they contain nitrogen. A molecule with nitrogen in it is usually a protein in your body, nitrogen. And also plants need the same thing. We put nitrogen in the soil and they draw it out of the soil. It's difficult. They draw it out of the atmosphere. They make proteins. And even some plants eat animals to get protein. But proteins are it, man. That's the number one thing, protein. It's not only does it make your own proteins, your muscles and your hair, but it also makes all those enzymes in your body that have different, very specific utility in your body. Protein. That's made out of amino acids. Amino acids are the molecules that contain the nitrogen. And there are 20 of them in our body. 20. We use 20. There's a lot of others in the world. I think there's like 100 and something in the world, but the human body needs 20 of them. And we get them from consuming protein from plants or animals. Now, sometimes like corn is called the almost perfect protein because it has every amino acid we need except one. It has all 19 inside corn. It doesn't have any lysine, but there are some varieties of corn. It's called high lysine corn. That has all 20. So, but it's not a lot of protein. It's kind of nice, but it's not a lot like if you were to eat an animal product or a soy product. So protein, amino acids, and we need these amino acids in our diet. We can take some amino acids and change them into other amino acids to end up getting the whole 20. But by and large, we have to get them out of our diet. We've got to eat the right amount of protein. So everybody's got that figured out. Protein. You must have protein. And there's people that cannot process amino acids, and they're allergic to some amino acids, and they have a rough time. Some of them cannot eliminate protein. So if you eat too many of them, then they pass out of the urinary tract. Some people have difficulty with that. But most people do okay with proteins, and they assimilate them correctly. And, you can get I don't need to give you a long list of foods that contain protein. Most of you know it. And start out with its muscle tissue, fish, anything that was an animal, the 80% of it, the stride weight is going to be protein. Plants, plenty of plants have protein on it, and most people go to soy products to get protein. There's plenty of others, like I just mentioned, corn. Okay, the next macronutrient is fats and oils. Fats. Now, they're not, most of them are not structural. There are a couple of them that are structural that help our body hold together, but most of these are energy and also hormones. they're hooked in with the other amino acids, and they turn out to be hormones for us. Hormones, again, are the things that guide and run our body, tell us what to do, produce estrogen, and etc. So fats are essential for energy, and they also have a role in hormones. Fatty acids, and we talk about this all the time. Fats are bad for you. These fats are good for you. Unlike protein, which is almost all good for you, we say, oh, these are bad fats, these are good fats. I don't even know what all that stuff means, because most of the information on fats is just completely wrong. I mentioned to you a couple of months ago that there was original research done in the 60s that was it was a sin. It should have been against law, and the guy should be in jail, that first published this story about certain fats will kill you. And the only fats that's going to kill you are the ones that are man-made, the trans fats. Stay away from a trans fat. It does not exist in nature. And the issue is it is probably the most delicious fat on the planet, but it does not belong in your body. It will absolutely give you a heart attack. And it's the stuff that everything that was fried used to be in. The big names in that are like Crisco and other brand names. It's things that potato chips and are fried in, everything, but that tastes really good. Fried in trans fats. It's made by taking a natural fat molecule and bubbling hydrogen through it and saturating all these bonds with hydrogen, and it's not natural whatsoever. It will kill you. So I can say that without a doubt. Don't need any trans fat. There's no place for it. I've not seen any published data on it. Now, maybe 100 years from now, somebody will find some weird thing about trans. Oh, that little piece is good for you. It doesn't matter. Stay away from it. It will kill you. All the other fats are good for you. Some of them you shouldn't take more than others, but even like saturated fats, which is animal fat, good for you. And I'll argue anybody with that. They do not cause high cholesterol, and they do not clog your arteries. You don't have fat floating around in your blood. That's not how it works. And in fact, babies, look what babies eat here. Their mother's milk. It's trans fat in there. It's like 30% trans, is 30% of, not trans, 30% of animal fat, saturated fat. So what kind of deal is that? We're feeding these babies poison? And also, when you store energy, excess energy, what do you store it as? A poison? That just doesn't make any biological sense. I don't know why that all got bought into, but saturated fat is it's good for you. It's butter. It's those type of things. It also comes out of fish, and there are some saturated fats in plant product, but most of it is non-saturated fat. That's an animal fat. And there are fats that are in, like another one is coconut oil. Boy, I tell you, back in the 70s and 80s, that people said that stuff will kill you. That's not true either. We don't know enough, so we don't need to be making up things. But there are some fats inside coconuts that are tremendously good for you. Linoleic acid and linoleic acid. Those have been shown to regulate the brain, are essential for you to think clearly. So those are good for you. And also fats are a structure too, because you're sitting on your butt right here, you got a little fat on there. It's actually padding. Yes, our body is protected. A lot of that fat is not just to store energy, it's actually to support your body, to protect it. Our kidneys are surrounded in a layer of fat in order to protect them from injury. And it gives us shape and form along with our own protein, the muscles. So those are the two. That's number one and number two. What was that? Protein for structure for our muscles and regulation of all those enzymes. And then there's fats, which are for energy and for structure also. And they also help regulate our brain. All right, the next big one is carbohydrate, macronutrient number 3, carbohydrate. So I've really covered this previously a lot, but carbohydrate is a name that doesn't make any scientific sense. It's because when it was first discovered in the late 1800s, when they did a chemical analysis, they thought it was carbon hooked to a water molecule. The analysis said, oh, there's a carbon and there's a water, so this must be a carbohydrate. Well, that's not how it is at all. It's actually a long chain of carbons, like a string of pearls, carbon, 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 carbon. And then off of each one of those carbon, on one side is the hydrogen and H, on the other side is an OH, a hydroxyl unit. So it's not water at all, but it does come with two H's and an O, H, OH, H, OH, and then over here it might flip around, be OH and H and OH and H. And that's how we distinguish between these carbohydrates. So we're stuck with the name, but it includes sugar. Sugar. The ones we're all familiar with, of course, are fructose and glucose and sucrose. Fructose is fruit sugar. Most of these sugars were named from where they were first discovered. Like mannose came out of mammals and milk. And then fructose, well, came out of, it was discovered in fruits. So we named them like that. And sucrose is an interesting one because that's the most common sugar that you come across. It's table sugar, the white stuff that you put in your tea or your coffee or put it on your food and put it in everything you cook. And it's even in potato chips. That's sucrose is made out of one fructose molecule and one glucose molecule. Now they're both each made of these little carbohydrates, 6 carbs here, carbons units on the glucose with all those hydrogen and oxygens on them. When you hook them together, they're two, they go into a circle and then they hook together like that. That's sucrose. Well, you eat that and it instantaneously dissolves into its glucose and fructose components, just like salt, sodium chloride. It immediately dissolves into the sodium and the chloride. I mean, instantaneous, fast as light travels. And boy, that stuff will kill you. So not only do we eat too much of it, but it was meant to be consumed along with polyflavonoids. You know, these flavonoids we talk about all the time. Without those flavonoids, that sugar is thought by the body to be a poison. And then you go into chronic inflammation. And this is where all these diseases come from, because your body then breaks down after a time. You get things like diabetes and Alzheimer's, and that's not good for you whatsoever. So anyways, those sugars are absolutely necessary for us. Just don't overload on refined table sugar. And forget that high fructose corn syrup, which is totally synthetic product. It belongs in there with those trans fats. Just don't eat it. Avoid it if you can help it. But now I'm not talking about corn, corn sugar by itself. That's okay. But this high fructose corn syrup, it's just all these fructose jammed together because it has a high energy value. It's very sweet and it's extremely cheap to make. And who do you think invented that stuff and promoted our use? They ain't gonna hear anybody say, who invented high fructose corn syrup? Well, the corn industry did. The corn industry invented that and then actually pushed it on the American public. And now high fructose corn syrup is in everything that's sweet. But I do see us coming around. I think many of you will acknowledge, everyone here knows that high fructose corn syrup is probably bad for you. You've heard that somewhere, at least as a rumor. So it's slowly coming out. Stay away from that. Stay with natural sugars if you can. You can use honey. You can even use sucrose if you use it sparingly. But my goodness, sucrose, that's in the last 200 years, 150 years, we now consume the world, not just Australia, Europe, US, the world has had a tenfold increase in the amount of refined sugar, which is table sugar. And even in the last 50 years, we've doubled it. So, that's like we were going, okay, times 1, times 2, times 3, you got the last 50 years, and boom, we double it. And then you come to me or another health professional, say, I don't know, I got all these problems, I got a headache, I got colds, and I said, oh my, well, why don't you lay off the sugar? Carbohydrates. So they're usually used for energy. They also can fit in there and help make up hormones. And they are essential. They are so essential that if you do not eat enough sugar, your body takes some of those fatty acids I talked about and turns them into sugar. It's called glucose neogenesis. It means new making of glucose. It's got to have it. And if you look at your blood, the sugar in your blood, there are these enzymes that we told you about coming from protein. There's like 10 of them, control points, that work to keep your sugar high. And there's only 2 of them that work to keep your sugar low. That's how important sugar is to your body. If you don't have enough, you'll pass out. And you can't operate, not just can't do exercise, you can't even breathe. You have to maintain a proper level of sugar in your diet, and your body is very good at keeping that level. And this is one of the reasons you have such trouble losing weight, is because you've had sugar your whole life. Even when you were a baby and your mother's in it, she was probably drinking a Coca-Cola and herself consuming too much sugar, and you as a developing fetus had high blood sugar right in the womb, and you're born, and the first thing they do is they start giving things to the kid as a candy right away as soon as they can, and the kid's life. Don't you remember that moment when your kid or your grandchildren first got a hold of a piece of candy? Their eyes, wow, what's going on? It's heroin. It's heroin. Yeah, that's just not supposed to happen like that. You know, that's not nature, except coming across some honey every now and then in the wild. And even then, boy, you got the bees all over you. You don't sit there and just consume it with all those bees stinging you. No, you take it
So,
little by little.
Dr. Ahrens, I want to intervene here because I think you might have been giving your grandkids some sugar like lollipops somewhere there by the sounds of it. I'm pretty sure. But I've got 2 questions as we wind up this call to try and stay on time. Is that just in a shortened version, if possible, like if people did look at a paleo, keto, and Atkins diet, all of the fad diets that are out and about there, what makes them different? I know that's probably very hard for you to give me a shortened version, but for the people that are on here that, we spoke about why paleo, why keto, why Atkins, what makes them unique, and understanding everything that you've explained to us again today,
Yes.
why would people consider taking or going down the route of any of those particular diets?
No, that's really the question that we'll get to. And so after laying out this basic part, I said we didn't have time. We're going to have to address the specific diets next week. But what happens is you have these units, including in the vitamins and minerals was the last group, and they're the little switches in our body. They're the controllers. So you got those 4 groups. Well, those diets differ in the ratio of those 4 groups and the amount, and they exclude some and they increase others. And then they all, besides that, then they talk about the timing. When should you take protein? When should you take sugar? And the fats, and you should avoid certain fats, or you should avoid certain proteins, you avoid certain carbs, or increase them. And then throw in the water. How much water should you take? That's really the basis of all the different diets. We can add in there that there are some diets you're told that you ought to take them according to your blood type. So you're this A, B, O, positive, negative. According to that is when what type of diet you should have. So then again, those ingredients are adjusted. Proteins are up or down, carbohydrates up or down, and fats up and down. That's the really only difference in those different diets. Then they will tell you that, okay, well, the timing of when you're going to eat this is really important. And, some of that stuff is really true. Some of it is true. Most of it is just balderdash, but some of it really has a basis in fact. So we have those 4 things. And when I talk to you next week about the following week about, okay, this one is a carbohydrate restricted diet. And that is basically a paleo diet, Atkins diet, caveman diet, low carb diet, keto diet. That's the basis of that, is a low carb. And I'll tell you what they are trying to, what kind of outcome they're trying to generate in your diet. I'll give you one brief example right now. It's the keto diet, which is the Atkins diet you've heard of. Reduce the carbohydrates almost down to nothing, like 5 grams a day. And your body, as I just told you, has to do something. And it starts trying to make more sugar, but at the same time, it starts burning alternative sources of fuel like fats. And it uses those to power your brain. That's the keto diet, because it sends your body into ketosis. And people report remarkable results on this. And also people report kidney damage. So we're going to go into that next week. I know I've advertised, hey, we're going to talk about keto, but I got thinking since that advertisement, we need to understand these 4 groups first before we can even discuss, well, okay, keto, what is that, good or bad? And let you decide if you think that's good or bad, instead of just following a diet guru.
So I've got another question too then, Dr. Ahrens. Like when we're looking at our diet and what we choose to eat, and as we age, how important is it, or what is the reference back to age? Like as we age, do we need to address our dietary intake, but also sex? So when we look at between being a male or a female, and that's 2 questions, but age and then sex, whether we're male or female, what impact and food choices are we looking at because we are female or because we are male or because of our age? Like, is there some sort of reference back to those areas when we're looking at our food choices to benefit us?
Yes, there is, but it's not as important as you think. So that's really breaking news. Actually, yesterday, a new study came out, an extensive study that was, I trust it. I read it. I didn't just read it in the on the internet. I read it. I know these authors, and they're actually a group of like 100 scientists that contributed to this long-term project and found out that much of what we thought we knew, we didn't know at all. There is very little difference between male and female. Once you adjust for body weight and body composition, percent fat. So it's very little difference. Number two, there are 4 stages in your life about your calorie consumption. One of them is the first week that you're born. You have the same requirements as your mother. After the first week, your metabolism takes off into high gear, and in just a month or so, it's 50% faster than an adult. Once it reaches the teens, from there, the 20. So what happens is the baby goes from same as a mom up to 50% higher, and then slowly comes down until it hits around 20. And then when you're age 20, all the way up to 60, it's mostly flat. It just drops like a 0.5% difference a year. So by the time you reach 60 and get into 90, then 90 really slows down as you go from 60 to 90. Then you can even be down 20% of what you were when you were 20 years old. And we didn't know that at all. We thought you just, after you got to be an adult, your metabolism just slowly slowed down. That's not true at all. Also, a male and a female metabolism, they're identical once they're adjusted for weight and body composition. What is different is that females in particular need more folate and iron than men, and that's almost the only thing. Your body is absolutely able to differentiate between male and female hormones, and you give it the right nutrients, which we'll go into a little bit more in the future. It will make the hormones that you need in the right ratios. But women do need more iron than men, and they absolutely need folate. Folate, or folic acid, is the chemical responsible for producing the little egg sacs that turn into the eggs on the ovaries. And if they're not developed properly, your child can end up with having neurological issues eventually born. So males also need folic acid, but not as much as a female. I hope that answers your question, but that's a brand new research. Now, once I said that, it's absolutely true that every individual can be different. I can have twice the metabolism rate than you do and vice versa, but that is the overall pattern and general recommendation that we know now, that it's not a just decline from the 20s. It's really flat most of your life, and then it goes down after you get over 60. So it stays low first week or two and then goes up 50% more right away the first month, and then it slowly comes down to your 20, and then it's flat to your 60 and then drops.
So Dr. Ahrens, really what you're saying to us then, if I'm understanding this correctly, that we are what we eat, regardless of our age. So it's very important to understand, exactly what you've gone through with the different food groups and how important it is to understand what we should be consuming, because it is going to benefit our bodies regardless of whether we're male, female, or our age. But what I also wanted to ask of you, it's been asked in the questions here, is to whether it's possible to get the link to the research that you were just discussing, if I can get that from you later, and I'll post it into your group.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So I'd like to wrap that up because we've gone over our time. So is there anything you'd like to add before we finish today?
No, you are what you eat. I told you, you are what you eat. Diet is the key to everything here. And if you don't start out with a good diet, everything else is going to be a disaster. I've kind of halfway apologized for talking about macronutrients instead of specific diets. But as I prepared myself to talk about this, I said, we've really got to get this basis here, because a lot of people don't understand what even amino acid is and how does that relate to protein and carbohydrate. They're all essential. You must have them, but we abuse them. So come back in future and we'll pick up on those diets.
Well, I just want to thank you so much, Dr. Ahrens, because we learn every single time that you present to us, and this is where it's important for people to utilize the knowledge that Dr. Ahrens shares. Like, we put it into his page, it's on his YouTube channel as well, so you can also always share. Don't try and be the expert. We've got the expert in the house. So just share what he has given to us, because it's a gift that we have. And I want to thank you so much, Dr. Ahrens, and for every week you turn up and you do provide us with invaluable information that we're able to gift on to others, because it is a gift of knowledge. And I thank you, my friend, and we look forward to seeing you in the future.
Thank you.